For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Thabi Madiba, researcher and analyst. Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
The EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu was in hot waters when he tried to paint Treasury Deputy Director General Ismail Muminat as a corrupt person who undermines black people. Do you think Shivambu was indeed racist?
Let's put it this way. Part of what he was saying, the reasoning, was valid, that we do want to promote African leadership because the Africans are the majority of the population in South Africa. But that doesn't mean that there are no people of other races who are dedicated to the cause of freedom and who serve the country very well. And he was implying that Muminat was insensitive to this, and he was undermining the Director General, who's an African, and Muminat was on every committee and all sorts of stuff, and he's the only person representing the Treasury. And the Director General came back and said it's not the case. He himself wanted Muminat to be there because he's the specialist on this, that, and the other. And the problem with what Shivambu was saying is that it was attributing to Muminat a willingness to undermine Africans, and that he was insensitive and all of these things. Just as a number of statements of Malema have suggested the majority of Indians are racist. Now, I think with these things, and also the statements that are being made about whites, we're not going to kill whites for now, or I want to, what did he say, cut the throat of whiteness. Now, all of these things are in a country where there is a lot of racism, from Indian to African, from white to African, sometimes from African to Indian, African to white. In a situation like this, a responsible leader has to try to, on the one hand, recognize the reasons why there may be resentments of minority groups, whether Indians, Africans, or coloreds, and on the other hand, to combat the development of chauvinism and racism on the side of the African people. Now, in 1949, there was bloodshed between Indians and Africans in then Natal, and the leaders of the ANC and the Indian Congress together, Chief Luthuli and Dr. Naika, went round to the communities to try and mend bridges. And I've recorded in my book on the ANC Underground that a few months after this, ANC people were coming out of a rally and they saw the police harassing traders, Indian traders. They formed a cordon around them, so that this thing of hostility is not inevitable from either side, because the Indian Congresses were in alliance with the ANC. The Coloured People's Congress, Coloured People's Organization, it was called at one stage, was in alliance with the ANC. So was the Congress of Democrats, which is a white organization. So leadership today needs to be very, very careful about the words that are used, that they don't inflame things or create new types of animosity.
And do you agree with Malema's recent remarks about Indians? Because he said the majority of Indians are racist. And he said it is evidence when you look at the voting patterns and the low marriage between Africans and Indians.
Well, I don't know, first of all, how you measure that the majority are racist. A lot of Indian people, by the way, are busy, sort of examining their soul, not because they're racist themselves, but because some of their uncles and aunts, they say, are racist. Myself, I'm a white. I'm not prepared to go and apologize to the nation because of racist who killed this young kid in Polity or one of these places, I don't feel that I take responsibility for every white. I don't believe it the same way every Indian takes responsibility for every other Indian. That is racist thinking. And I'm not prepared to, I don't agree with this press beating type of thing. So voting patterns, it seems to be true. I think that minority groups do fear, you know, in the UDF, we never had a sense that coloureds and Indians feared African majority. That's my impression. I was in the leadership of the UDF as well. However, the voting patterns from 1994 showed that a lot of them were fearful of the ANC. And, you know, the problem today is I can't say to people, no, you must go and vote ANC or you must go and vote EFF, because there's a lot of problems, quite apart from whether they've got an African leadership or not. So there can be a range of reasons why they don't. But I think we've got to address the fear and have people understand that everyone has a place in the new South Africa. Unfortunately, we are emerging from 10 years of Zumaism, for which the EFF leadership must claim considerable responsibility, as well as the current ANC leadership, so that it's a difficult period, and I think we've got to try to hold together to rebuild.
And can one characterize the EFF as a racist party, looking at the comments Malema make about other ethnic groups?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're racist per se, but I think that there is an irresponsibility in the statements that Shivambu and Malema and I think to some extent Ndlozi have been making, in the sense that they are not, they say, well, we didn't mean this literally and what, but they are feeding into this fear, which I think we, instead of feeding into this fear by making people fear more, we've actually got to find ways of making them less fearful and have a constructive inter-community building of bridges. And unfortunately, they're not doing that.
And lastly, don't you think the EFF will lose supporters from especially the areas that Malema is always targeting, such as the Indians and the whites, leading up to the 2019 elections?
Well, he says he doesn't get a lot of support from them. He's got some white supporters and some Indian supporters and coloured supporters, but I don't know how many there are. I don't know what effect this will have. But the main support is Africans, I think, and I don't know whether he'll win or lose support. But he will lose support from people who want stability in this country, who don't want to risk a conflagration, who have read about or remember 1949.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about the EFF and race.